Hey guys, my name is Lauren Turner and I am a grad student. I'm a second year student getting my PhD in genetics, and I wanted to start this series to let you guys know about all the different ways you can apply to grad school, get into grad school, and if grad school is for you. If you clicked on this video, you clearly are looking into applying to a PhD, MD PhD, or an MS program. Basically, those are all graduate level degrees that you can pursue at a university like UT Health or any other across the nation. But each of those degrees serve a different purpose, and that's what we are going to talk about today. So let's start with the PhD program, because that is the program that I am in. A PhD is a doctorate degree, and as a PhD, you will have a doctor, just like you would as an MD or an MD PhD. The difference is PhDs are typically more on the academia side of science, research focused, farm industry, science industry. You cannot practice medicine with a PhD, and I think that's the biggest thing that people need to understand. A PhD versus an MD, you have to have an MD if you want to practice medicine. However, as a PhD, you can still be in healthcare spaces where you might interact with patients, but you can't prescribe the medicine, or just like how you go to a doctor to get a checkup, you can't do that as a PhD. You have to have an MD to do that. Speaking of an MD, let's segue over to an MD PhD. So some people will do a dual degree program, which is getting 2 degrees at one time, and you can get your MD doctorate and your PhD doctorate. So you are a double doctor squared. With an MD PhD, you can do research, you can work in academia, but you also have that MD, so you can practice medicine, you can actually work in a hospital setting, work with patients. Typically, people who get MD PhDs, they are more likely to stay in like an academic setting or have close ties to an academic institution, so they can do research and practice medicine at the same time. So why PhD? Why MD PhD? I think the biggest debate when it comes to that is if you're interested in doing research, but you also want to work with patients and do that type of research where you're directly using patients or enrolling patients into different clinical trials or things of that nature. With an MD, you have that ability to face patients, versus with a PhD you can't. Or if you want to closely monitor a patient who might have some really abnormal disease, and you're like, okay, well, this would be interesting to do a research study on, that MD PhD would come into play, because you can still monitor your patient, have that type of MD doctor interaction with the patient while doing your research and getting the funding that you would need as a PhD. Because depending on who you ask, it's easier to get funding from the government like NIH, NCI, when you are a PhD versus an MD. Most MDs, they're not going to have that type of government funding for certain projects depending on what it is. Okay, so last is an MS, which is a master's degree. As a master's student, I've never got my master's, I'm not a master's student. However, it's again another type of graduate degree. Typically those programs are 2 years or 3 years depending on what you're getting it in, and they can be used in a variety of ways, whether it's healthcare, whether it's in industry and academia, just like the PhD, just like the MD, but the time frame is a lot shorter. And yeah, that's pretty much it. They all kind of do the same thing. It's just a matter of what all you can do with those degrees. Let's talk about the timeline. A PhD is around 5.5 years. And so I say 5.5 because it depends on how much experience you have coming in, how much research you've done relating to whatever your dissertation project is going to be. That can take longer than 5 years, maybe a little less than 5 years, but regardless, the average time for a PhD program is 5.5 years. If you're going into a PhD program in natural sciences, like me, those are typically paid for and supported through government funding. However, if you're getting a PhD in something else, let's say like art history or something that's not a natural science, you're most likely going to end up having to pay for that PhD, or you're going to have to look for scholarships or your own personal funding. However, majority of natural science PhDs are paid for. That was one of my big pulls for my program. I did not want to get a graduate degree and go into debt. That was not it. With an MD PhD, it is also paid for. However, it's about 7 years because you're getting 2 doctorate degrees. And so typically what will happen is whatever institution you're at that's offering an MD PhD program, that first year, you will take a series of classes, typically within your MD degree program, and most of those classes should roll over into the classes you should be taking as a first year PhD student. So typically how I've seen it broken down is students will do the first 2 years of their MD program, and then they will go over to their PhD side of the institution and do their PhD research, get that out the way, and then finish up year 3-4 of their MD program. So even though I say 7 years, it could be longer, but you're going to be there for at least 7, at least. And then like I said, the master's program, those could be about 2-3 years depending on what you're doing, and they may or may not be paid for. I know my school offers a stipend for students in master's programs depending on what program they're in. So definitely do your research when it comes to that. So how do you know what program is right for you? Honestly, I would say really think about what you want to do as a career, because depending on what it is you want to do, you may need just the PhD. You may need an MD PhD, you may need a master's, or you may not even need a graduate degree. And I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned during my first year when I've been going to different events, networking. I'm realizing that some of the career avenues I'm interested in, some of them didn't really require a graduate degree. The graduate degree will put me at a higher position when I join, and some of the experience that I learn and experience that I gain while I'm in grad school, that'll carry over on my resume, and that will look good for when I'm applying for jobs, so I can get a higher salary job. But if you're someone who may not know what you want to do, take a gap year, do your research, and really think about what type of career you would be interested in pursuing. Because let's say you want to go into marketing, like pharma marketing. That's become something that's really big because of TikTok, YouTube, whatever. You can have a master's degree and go into pharma marketing. You can just have your bachelor's degree and go into pharma marketing. However, when it comes to how much you want to make, what type of position you want to play, or what type of position you want to have in that industry, that depends on experience and exposure to different types of opportunities, different types of people. So really think about what you want to do as a career before going into grad school. Me personally, I knew I wanted to do research, and I thought I wanted to do clinical trials and be in the clinical space. So that's why I thought going the PhD route would be best for me. Now that I'm entering year 2, I've done some chatting with people. I realized that I'm more on the business side of science. I love the business aspect of science, and that's the pathway I'm starting to explore now. That may change by this time next year, but right now I'm really into business, and I'm leaning towards going into business development or working with startup companies, going into marketing, going into consulting. So I'm doing more research on that. Yes, my PhD will be useful. However, there also could have been an opportunity for me to have done maybe a master's program, or even taken a gap year or 2 to gain some experience to make sure like that's what I want to do, and this PhD will will serve me. Does that make sense? Yeah, it does. Anything else relating to knowing if a program is right for you? I think the biggest thing comes down to how much money you want to make. If whatever career field you're interested in requires you to have a more advanced degree, and are you willing to commit time to really doing your best in these programs? Because what's the point? What's the point of either going into debt or spending time studying, stressing out, if it's not worth the commitment? If you know you cannot commit for that long of a time frame, don't do it. Don't do it. I honestly tell people, if it's not paid for, don't do it. That's truth. The only reason why I'm in grad school is because it's paid for. I get a stipend and tuition's covered. I have health insurance covered by my school. That's the only reason why I'm in grad school. Not the only reason why, but that's one of the main reasons why I decided to go to grad school instead of just, I got my degree from Hampton, and now I'm moving on. So take your time, think about it. It's a really big decision and it's a big commitment. If you've made it to this point in the video, I want to share a secret with you that is a fine print secret. It's not a secret, but it's the fine print. And all of these videos will have a fine print moment. The fine print for this video when it comes to picking a program is, once you pick it, make sure you commit. Because if it is a paid for program and you don't read the contract, you will find yourself in a trick bag. And the reason why I say that is, most of these schools, if they're paying for it, they're investing in you. If they're investing in you, they're hoping that means that you plan to stay in some sort of career field related to what you went to school for. So if I'm paying you $100 to come and cut my grass and for you to be the best grass cutter ever, I don't want to see you down the street fixing cars. You need to be cutting grass. That's what I invested my money into. Because if you're doing something else, I don't want my money back. And that's the fine print. That's the fine print. If you go to school and you're like, this is not for me, I don't want to do this anymore, you could quit. But they're gonna want their money back because they've invested all this money and time into you and they're not seeing a return on their investment. That's the fine print. And people don't realize that. I mean, it's a scholarship. It's all this money going into you. So they expect you to stay in the program. All in all, take your time when you are thinking about what degree program is best for you. I am so excited that you made it to the end. I hope to see you next week, and we are going to talk more about grad school and the application process because it is open. The application process is open right now, and we're gonna break down how to apply to grad school and picking a school that works for you. So until next time, I'll see you around.